Okay, we're going to talk about sort of telcos, data centers, AI. But before we get into that conversation, perhaps you could just give us a little bit of an intro into Hailo, the company, sort of how long you've been going, what it is you've done to date, etc. So yeah, be good to start there.
Sure. So Halo has been founded in 2017. So we are almost 9 years on the road, and this is quite a long ride. When we started, Edge AI, which is the premise of Halo, was still a distant thought. Nobody was talking that much about Edge AI. AI was already established or being established in data centers and cloud. And our idea was mainly to take it out of the cloud and basically make it available on edge devices, which means anywhere outside of the cloud, generally speaking, under the assumption or our understanding and belief, so to speak, that AI is a seminal capability, sort of an enabling technology. And we took we built up a team that will basically uh, take leverage of our understanding of microarchitecture and building SoCs and compute machines that can run in the confines of edge devices. And we can probably speak more to that. What is an edge device for us? But generally speaking, what we've done is we've built silicon and all the software stack on top of it to allow people to transition from running neural networks that run on data centers and move them to devices and put their imagination and their wisdom into it while we serve as kind of the baseline infrastructures, of course, with some examples and everything to allow our customers, potential customers to innovate.
Okay, so you say you started 9 years ago, and I know back then clearly AI did exist, but clearly today the whole world has gone kind of gone AI crazy, if you like. It's sort of everywhere. And in terms of the telcos, which I know we're going to focus on a bit, they're needing to invest to meet the demands, particularly for Gen AI. I suppose the first question is, do you think they're managing this transition? How well are they, coping with the demands of AI?
So I'd humbly say that that's hard for me to say that. We have been in the context of telcos pretty recent now, in the sense that telcos are big infrastructures and natively they are deploying things first in the cloud or experiencing first in the cloud in the big data centers, or either of their own or the mega providers of data center capabilities. Now, for us, the telco domain has become edge in the context of the recent whirlpool of generative AI, where the traditional deployment of B2B that we were focused on, which is more, as I said, on edge devices that are self-contained and not a whole system with an infrastructure, has been changing in the recent, I would say, 24 months or 18 months with this dominance of generative AI that allows businesses to start considering moving things from the center to the edge and vice versa, actually. So it's basically a continuum. When we say edge, it's not as opposed to the cloud, but rather complementary to. And in that sense, I think the ever-growing need to seek for more avenues to generate revenue for those big companies like the telcos, they are looking at their edges of the network as potential position or location or premise, if you will, to harness and harvest more use cases that can bring more subscribers or ensure that subscribers are not leaving them because it's a very competitive space. So that's where we find our match, a recent potential match, maybe. It's not even a proven match, but a potential match with the telcos, where we offer our technology as complementary to what they do in their data centers. And the reason being that as you scale up and you have a magnitude of many, many subscribers, the aggregation doesn't work anymore to some extent. So you cannot aggregate that many subscribers and serve them 24/7 with the full capacity of the potential. So if you push it towards the edges of the network, which are gateways, set-top boxes, streamers, media centers, and the likes that reside in the subscriber's home, you can offer potentially more services, better services by incorporating things that are in day-to-day language more intelligent. And that's where we are trying to cater in the sense of delivering our solutions as an add-on or a complementary part to those boxes that will allow to deploy some use cases that can go all the way to the edges of the network.
Okay, and in terms of the sort of telco's current focus, would I be right in saying that, as I think you've already mentioned, data center interconnects, we've got these large language models which are driving the AI, so that's their sort of immediate or their current focus. But as you say, when the inferencing happens and all the AI applications start getting rolled out, that's when longer term the edge AI is maybe, is it a bigger opportunity, do you think, than the large language models in terms of supporting the real time or near real time applications?
I think we are seeing some kind of a convergence. I mean, it's not, again, as opposed to large language models is what we are proposing today to deploy. The word large is a bit misleading because indeed they are large compared to older models, but within the large language model domains and also VLMs, which is the visual and language in a multimodality sense, you have a whole span of models from the smaller ones. So there are actually a small large language models, which is
Yeah.
kind of contradiction in terms, but it's in the notion of as compared to or as opposed to the classic AI models. So those smaller models, they can run actually on edge devices. They run today on phones, they can run on laptops, and they can run on those set-top boxes with our hardware. And by doing that, you can do a complementary span of use cases that allows to cater those use cases and be focused on within your premise, within your home, also for privacy, but definitely for offloading the main data centers. Because if you're here and there asking ChatGPT for some query, then that's fine. You can aggregate multiple subscribers, and that's definitely a use case where the cloud will, or the data center will remain the center of aggregation. But in many cases, if you want something that constantly monitors and being kind of a companion or an assistant that's always on in your premise, as I said, both for privacy and security and intimacy, and also for the fact that it needs to be always on, sometimes would need to offload from the data center. Otherwise, the cost or total cost of ownership, let alone the fact that you cannot cater it to all the subscribers all the time. So that's the idea behind adding these kinds of, or the thought process behind adding these kinds of applications into the edges of the network.
So, what is it that the telcos need to do to be, or maybe they are already doing it to be get ready for this development? I mean, in terms of sort of what, where, when, and how. I mean, yeah, just describe that process that they need to go through to make sure that edge AI is something that they can, cater for.
Like any technological disruption, it's a process, and a process takes both time and some vigor to actually believe in it, build the business use case on one hand, and also the technology that can match the needs on the other hand. So it's a process that takes place in multiple levels in those kind of companies. Some of it happens in the advanced technology office, so to speak, where you experiment with things, you imagine what use cases can be deployed, test them, sometimes at a small scale with some kind of a small proof of concept, and then enlarge it to larger span. And eventually, you need to build the business plan of how to deploy it. What plans will you offer your subscribers? How will you entertain the full scale potential? And I would say that it's no different than any other enabling technology. I've been there in the past where mobile was in its early days, and nobody imagined that you would do what we are doing in our pocket, in the tools that we have in our pocket today. So putting connectivity in every device was sometimes something that was unimaginable. But today, nobody thinks how we can deal without it. I think it will be sort of the same process. It will begin with sprouting with small use cases that are very limited, maybe limited in time, maybe limited in space or in regions. But then it will become much more common and proliferated. That's my vision at least. But it takes two to tango. So the telcos are still in the process of kind of embracing and understanding how they can A, apply the technology, and B, make money out of it, because that at the end of the day is what will trigger adoption.
And in terms of Halo, your sort of position in this landscape, I know you've recently launched your second generation AI accelerator, so that which is the Halo 10H, I think, which obviously suggests that there was a first generation. So talk us through your sort of journey, what it is you started with, and then the second generation, what that adds to the party.
Yeah, it's a good point. Maybe taking a step back, the evolution of edge AI, the way I see it, is going from the classic approaches of vision, like taking video inputs and basically analyzing what's in the scene. That's what we tend to call perceptive AI or AI for perception. This was the more classic, now we call it classic, but then it was the edge AI, which is basically to take video in. It was more common as a B2B use case where you put it on video management systems and you analyze videos that come in and identify what's going on there, get event triggering and stuff like that. Then that was actually where our Hailo 8, the first generation that we provided to the industry, was focused at. By the way, when it came more common and we ramped it to mass production, it was also adopted by the maker community in the form of an add-on to the Raspberry Pi community, so people can enjoy it worldwide. It's the largest community to date that we know of edge AI devices that people can get access to and buy over the counter, basically. So that was the first generation. Then what happened next is that we identified something we didn't know it at first, and that is that most demand for high capacity AI is in this video domain, and then we focus on taking the technology and making it self-contained. Instead of an accelerator, we launched another product line, which is what we call VPU, and that is for cameras. So it's basically doing all the things that the camera can do, and actually there are CCTV and IP cams that are launching and are basically intelligent cameras because you have all this AI on the camera itself. Again, this is an edge case, but this time for a very specified and concrete product, and this is the IP camera space for all kinds of applications. It could be for security, it could be for access control, and it could be for retail. So these are the kind of applications that are second device, which is actually a first generation of a VPU, is focused at and is launching these days and ramping within cameras, within real products to the market. Now, the second generation of accelerators, as you mentioned, which is actually our third silicon, the Hailo 10, is actually riding on this curve of Gen AI, and it's actually adding to the classic support of AI, also generative AI. So it allows now to deploy not only the classic AI applications, perception, enhancement, and what I mentioned earlier, but also to do generative tasks like LLMs, VLMs, automatic speech recognition, all the things that are more man-machine interface oriented. And that is where the Hailo 10 is focused on all that I've mentioned about deploying it into end devices like what the telcos are looking at.
Okay, and in terms of the sort of the benefits you provide, and maybe comparing to what else might be out there, the performance it delivers, etc. What is it that you're bringing to the telcos and others in terms of the benefits that they can expect to gain from your technology?
So the basic claim to fame with all our product lines, that's based on the core technology, and the approach that we've taken from the get-go is to redesign the microarchitecture, something that you cannot do without manufacturing your own silicon. Basically, we did not take a classic compute device because that's something that's available out there. I mean, we're no better than a Qualcomm processor with an ARM inside, of course, in the classic domain. The whole point was to redesign the microarchitecture such that running or deploying neural networks on it would be much more efficient in terms of power and, of course, area efficiency. So that makes the ability to entertain something as large as an LLM, a VLM, or some very comprehensive transformer, and imagine it running on an edge device rather than in the cloud. So that allows you to fit in with a small box, small area, small size, small cost, naturally, or relatively smaller cost than what you would pay for a big GPU card, and still be able to run it on the edge device with the full performance and still fit in with the power constraints that an edge device carries. And that's basically the point that we're trying to sell across the industries that we are playing in, including telcos. Those edge boxes are basically powered with a simple power adapter. They need to fit in with this envelope or energy budget to allow it to run within your home from a classic power adapter. So that's part of the point of all our products.
Okay, maybe I mean, apologies if this is a silly question, but I'm just wondering how you see, because we've got, we've gone from CPUs to GPUs, NPUs, and I guess obviously quantum computing sort of floating somewhere out there in the future. I mean, do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts as to how sort of standardized these technologies can become, or as you're doing, do you think there's more future in individual companies sort of going back to basics, if you like, and building their own devices, but which are specifically built for, the applications as with yourselves, Edge AI specifically?
Yeah, that's why I mentioned at the beginning a lot of focus that was spent on the software stack, because I think the standardization comes at the level not of the bits and bytes, but rather at the level of the protocol stack or the programming stack. And that means that if you entertain or adopt the standards or de facto standards in the industry for running those kind of applications, and we've took a very long effort in putting put a lot of effort in making this very easy for user to transition or developer to transition from what is used to work based on the fact that we align with standard frameworks. And this is something that will definitely already being standardized in the sense that you develop with the given frameworks. We're not preaching to change the framework that you develop in, but rather we do the heavy lifting of taking it from there and mapping it to our own hardware. And that's what will happen in other cases. And I think there will be the fact across the board, which will make it clearly easy for developers and, so to speak, standard for running. This is what happened, by the way, with the x86 architecture. I mean, you can run the same program on an Intel device or on an AMD device, and it will run the same. That's the point with those frameworks. There's already been created an ecosystem around machine learning, which allows this.
Okay, and in terms of the sort of potential of where you are now and where you would hope to be, I mean, what's the sort of time for? I guess you when developing, you're already working with partners, and then when you obviously launch the solutions, then more people. So just I suppose, where do you think you are on the journey to make Edge AI your a core market and make yourselves known within that market, if you like?
I think it's a very good question, and I think it's also looking at in retrospect. I think it's also very segmented still. I mean, not all segments are at the same point in this race to adoption. Telco being pretty late because, as I mentioned, they're now starting to look into Gen AI, and everything that goes to B2B2C, more with the C in the consumer hands, is slower to adopt new technology in the sense of they adopt it first in the cloud and over the network, and then only comes the big platforms that match up and design new products. On the B2B domain, there is already some degree of adoption, and I think like any new technology, as I mentioned, it experiences this classic Gartner scale. The hype was there. I think we're past the hype, or somewhere between the hype and this chasm of looking how to make it big, and then it will slowly get in or infiltrate into common life and day to day. So I think that definitely on the maker world, as I mentioned, where people are the early adopters, then we are already there, as I mentioned, with the Raspberry Pi ecosystem and with the fact that this is de facto the classic go-to-edge AI solution. On the more conventional or traditional domains, we are still in the adoption phase, I would say. And it will take, I think, 2 to 3 more years before we'll see it everywhere, or maybe even more in some segments. But the adoption is starting.
And I also wondering, I mean, because obviously the edge has been talked about, and edge computing, as a concept for quite some time, and everyone was talking, or wondering what was going to be the killer application which was going to drive it to sort of whole-scale adoption. Do you have any thoughts as to whether such a application will exist, or as you've been describing, because there are so many different opportunities, do you think just the sum of all those opportunities will make it a huge opportunity, or do you think there will be, I know everyone used to talk about autonomous vehicles, for example, so do you still think that something like that might be the big app, or you just think there's going to be lots of quite significant applications, if you like?
I would follow what one very classic statement that I heard in this domain. It's they call it software 2.0, but generally speaking, I would say that the fact that instead of making humans talk to computers in the computer language, computer will start talking to humans in human language, meaning that the killer app would be the fact that, and we already see it, by the way, in the nature of use of the ChatGPT and the likes, is that instead of trying to adapt yourself to how the machine thinks, the machine now can understand how you think. And that will make more native interfaces, and I think this will be much more revolutionary than we can imagine, because it will change how interfaces are built. It will change how even menus in platforms are built, because you will just have to speak up to get things done. And it's not yet fully there. We see, as I said, the early sprouts of that, but I think it will become more mundane and common to think that way, and to design, build, and imagine that way. And then I think platforms in the industry will look different in that sense. So that's kind of the seed for the killer app. I think at the end of the day, per domain or per segment, it will take different shape and form, but that will be the kind of the seeding source of it, in my view.
Okay, and maybe then sort of finishing in terms of where Hailo will fit in within this developing landscape. I mean, on your roadmap, I guess you've got various objectives. Some you might be able to share, some maybe not. But just give us some idea, if you can, as to where Hailo is going. What's the journey look like, if you like, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think I'll split it into two. On the business side, of course, the idea is to try and position ourselves as a default choice for those cases where there's an emergence of need for this new technology, and we want to cater to that. So that's on the business front. On the roadmap front, naturally speaking, one can observe our track record to see where we're going at. I mean, we're going after, on one hand, with the accelerators, to look for the things that are emerging, because accelerators are relevant where you have something new, and it's also only for a window of time where there's something new has a lot of need, but no one to cater to that need. So the accelerator is an add-on that allows that. And where the market is more establishing, like in the VPU domain, then you do a self-contained device that can address the full span of applications that this domain needs. So that's where we'll continue, hopefully, to deliver on those two aspects. One on the accelerator for the emerging markets, and on the VPU and more focused self-contained device, SoCs, as they're called, towards markets that get more established and then you can take the socket of catering the whole solution.
And maybe just finally, do you see any particular sort of bumps in the roadmap or challenges for the, not necessarily for yourself, but for the industry, or do you think you're just overwhelmingly positive because AI is, here to stay, and everyone is sort of accepting of it, or is there anything that worries you that the momentum will suddenly stall, for example?
Yeah, the technologies, I'm always worried because I'm not a business guy, and I'm always concerned with the adoption and the fact that the technology is there, but for people to harness it, their use is something that takes time, a lot of patience, which sometimes the technologies of us don't have enough patience to wait for, and they already see what's behind or over the corner. And in that sense, I think that like any new technology, it has the challenge of crossing this chasm of not being adopted as originally imagined, because it always, in the hands of the end users, takes different shapes and forms. So it's a long ride, as always.
No, I mean that's been great to chat to you, and thank you so much for sharing so many insights into what's going on obviously at Hailo and your thoughts as to the sort of AI market more generally and with telco specifically. So Avi, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.